Welcome back to GTN's Coaches Corner, where we try to answer your training and racing questions. So, straight into it, James. First question from Alex Walmsley. Am I supposed to be actively pointing my toes when swimming? I can feel that in a relaxed position, my feet are catching water, but if I point my toes, I can tell my calves won't be happy after long, even if it's saving a few seconds per 100. I'm currently around 140 per 100 in the pool after starting in 2022 and self/GTN teaching.
Hey.
Nice.
Well, I can sympathize with this. In fact, I think most runners can sympathize with this. Your feet just become like kind of rudders. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you contract your calves, you can't get them to stay in that relaxed position. And they do act like a rudder, but it is something you should definitely work on. It is something that costs you a lot of energy in the water. You'll be surprised how much energy it costs you having those feet dragging. And it's probably more than you actually lose by having tired calves when you get out of the water. However, the solution is not to have absolutely stacked calves and do calf raises indefinitely. The solution is actually just to get more ankle flexibility.
Yeah, you shouldn't be like tensing your calf to like pull your ankles. I mean, it should just be relaxed.
You should be relaxed, but in a pointed position, which it doesn't come naturally to people who have been running their whole life. But you can stretch it. You can sit on your ankles, just
sort of like that rolling back onto your ankles lightly.
When you're watching telly for 10 minutes every evening, just sit on your ankles so that you're really stretching that whole front of your foot. Also strengthen the tibialis anterior, that muscle on the front of your shin. That definitely helps to relax those muscles on the front and allows them to lengthen, which will allow you to have your feet pointed in a more relaxed position when you're swimming.
The other trick I found for helping some people out is actually popping fins on when they're swimming. So actually just actively is like sort of stretching out and forcing the ankles to sort of stretch.
Definitely worth working on though.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Right, next one from Sebastian Schreiber. This is a bit of a long one. I'm following a long-term training plan for a 70.3 in September. It started in January and I'm now in the build phase. I still have other goals over the year, so I don't burn out. I also like the lifestyle. The longest bike ride is 3.5 hours long and scheduled for July. My projected finish time for the bike will be around 3 hours. The training plan starts to merge the long run and the long bike to one big brick session from then on. The bike part of the bricks won't be as long anymore. The longest brick will be 2.75 hours bike and then a 1.5 hour run early August. The brick will contain some race pace efforts. So the question, with knowing all of that now, should I prioritize volume over intensity? So should I keep the long runs mostly separated from the bike? And maybe I should keep adding bike distance up until the race distance. I feel like I could use longer, less intense bike build up just to get more mileage. I think we go on that. So basically what they're worried about is that merging of the long run with the brick into like a brick session.
Which is kind of like, do I really need to do big, long, heavy bricks before I get ready for a middle distance triathlon?
Yeah.
My answer, short answer, no. I really don't think there's any place. There is a place maybe 6 weeks out to do a test session where you do a big brick, where you do about a 2.5 to 3 hour ride. And
it's
then
kind of like
run
a simulation almost.
A simulation session where you test the nutrition, you test what you're eating and drinking on the bike. Is it going to sit well in your stomach when you're doing an hour and a half run off it? Maybe even one of those, either the bike or the run at roughly race intensity, so you can get a feel for what it feels like before race day. However, every weekend is definitely not the most efficient and effective way to train for a triathlon. I
really think it's going to be the run that's going to suffer, isn't it? Because it's always going to be off the back of the bike.
Absolutely, and your race is going to be off the back of the bike, and you're going to be tired. However, you don't want to be running tired in every single session, and there's also the mental load of having to basically prepare for a full triathlon every weekend, and that fatigue that comes after it. You're going to be absolutely wiped out on that Saturday afternoon, and then you become a bit of a weekend warrior where your whole week kind of builds to this massive session on a Saturday, and then you spend the next 3 days trying to recover from that, and then the next 4 days building up to this massive session on Saturday again.
Is that not how you're supposed to train?
No, Mark. Okay. That's definitely not the most effective way to train. To answer his question, I would say, he is better off doing like up to a 4 hour long ride. A 4 hour long ride is a good length for a 3 hour race ride. I think it's a very aerobic race. You are going to be aerobic most of the time. So if you can do 4 hours without absolutely smashing yourself, even if your race is only going to be 3 hours, that is very advantageous. And if you can fit that into your lifestyle, great. don't then run off it and put yourself in a massive hole. Take 24 hours, recover, and then do your long run the next day. You're slightly fresher. You can go a little bit faster, a little bit further in that long run. And again, you're not completely smashed when you get off it. So the following day you can do some light training and get, and be less of this roller coaster weekend warrior.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It makes me tired thinking about that training session. Right, yeah, cool. Good stuff. On to the next one then. Aaron Noir. Not really related to the announcement, but Ironman related. So it must have been under the Ironman
going back to Kona. Yeah.
All right. After a couple of years of peer pressure, I've signed up to my first Iron Distance triathlon. Race day is the first weekend of September. I'm building my base and setting goals. The latter is where I would like to get some advice. In the past 2 years, I've completed a half distance as my main race. Last year, finished in 5:45-ish. The year before, 5:35. Last year, I was coming off a year of accidents and injury, calf tear, in January, bike crash. Right now, I'm back at the same fitness levels as I was before my accident. So my C goal is clear. That is to finish. My question is, what should my A and B goals be based on my half distance times? I'm thinking 12 hour 30 as my A goal, double my half time and some extra, and 13 hours 30, middle of the pack last year, the same race which was in the half.
Right.
Okay. And also an extra question, actually. Sorry. Unrelated. Would you count mowing with a scythe as a cardio or core workout?
Mowing with a scythe? People still do that? I mean, it's definitely a core workout. I'm not sure how much it works.
It depends how big the lawn is.
How big the field is you're mowing. Yeah. I've never tried. Maybe I will do a GTN test on that. Put some heart rate monitors on and see. Anyway, I think his real question is the A, B, and C goals for an Ironman. How do you predict what you can possibly do in an Ironman? There's a few things to point out here. I think his C goal is perfect. Your C goal when you do your first Ironman or Iron Distance race is always just to finish. And remember to keep that in your mind because, and this is something I talk about quite a lot, and I'm going to say it now, goal inflation is a major thing when you're training for an Ironman. People start and they go, my goal is just to finish. I said, what's your A goal? Just to finish. What's your B goal? Just to finish. What's your C goal? Just to finish. And then as you get closer and closer, what's your A goal? I reckon I can probably do 11 hours. And then a month later, I reckon I could probably break 10 hours. And then a race day, they're lining up and going, I reckon I might be on for 9.5 hours here today. The conditions are perfect. And then they finish in 11 hours, which is way faster than they ever thought possible when they started training. They go, I'm so disappointed. I thought I was on for 9.5 hours. So don't fall into that trap. I would say, firstly, your C goal, stick to that C goal as to just finish.
Do you think 12 hours 30?
I think 12 hours 30. So
it's double their half.
So 2 years ago, extra. They did 5:45. And if you double that, that's 11:30. Yeah. And then a bit extra. I think your B goal, you want to be realistic. You don't want to be over enthusiastic. But if you've got 2 extra years of training, I think probably just doubling your half with 2 extra years of training is probably already fairly realistic. If you want to add a little bit extra for a cushion so that you can comfortably hit your goal, I would say probably realistically sub 12. However, 2 extra years of training is a massive thing, not to mention the experience of doing another one they did in 5:35, etc. I think your A goal should be pretty optimistic, and I think you should be optimistic. To set yourself up for the training between now and September, you should set yourself a goal of maybe sub 11:30, maybe even trying to get near that 11-hour mark and go, you know what, if everything goes perfectly between now and then, this is what I'm going to go for. You can adjust that as you get closer to the race if things don't go well, if you get an illness or you get an injury or something like that. But don't put yourself down and go, well, I only managed a 5:45. I'm never going to go faster than that, but and then it's going to be longer, so I'm going to add another half hour on top of that. And then you're aiming for 12.5 hours when realistically, if you start aiming for 11:30, you could do 11:30. So be optimistic with your A goal.
I think their A goal should just be trying to beat their training partner or something, which is basically what happens, isn't it? Basically what happens. Everyone starts off just go for 12 hours 30, and they start training with their mate, and they're like, oh, it'd be quite cool to beat Peter. We're starting around the same time. Yeah.
Make sure you enjoy it, though. Don't get caught up in the old goal inflation and all the rest of it.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Next question, just from Dustin McLean. I'm doing more intense program this year for 70.3, and the long rides are up to 4 hours. I feel absolutely exhausted after these and struggle to do anything after on a scheduled Saturday morning. Would I be better off doing these Friday night and taking Saturday off, or doing a recovery ride on Saturday? Or do I really need a 4-hour ride to prepare for a 70.3? I've got two young kids with many activities on Saturdays and busy running around and chasing. How do I best balance family and training here? Currently training 15 to 18 hours per week. Well, they're doing a good training volume considering.
15, 18 hours is on the high side for sure.
Good, yeah.
And if you're absolutely exhausted and struggling to fit it in, maybe you need to look at what you're doing in those 15 to 18 hours and trim the fat off it a little bit.
Do you think for a 70.3 you need to be going out and doing 4-hour rides?
As I said earlier, I think a 4-hour ride is very beneficial.
Yeah.
If you can fit it into your lifestyle. I think it's a price you don't necessarily have to pay to have a successful 70.3 ride. You're looking at 2.5 to 3 hours for your bike ride. Why are you going out for 4 hours? Unless it fits into your lifestyle and you can do it. Having said that, he also says he's doing them on a Saturday morning and then being absolutely smashed when he's trying to run his kids to classes and clubs and football matches and whatever else it might be. You don't have to do them on a Saturday morning. Yeah. However, I would also say that doing them on a Friday night after a long week at work is not necessarily a better solution. You may find that you have more energy on Saturday when you've finished your 4-hour ride on a Friday night and collapsed straight into bed and gone straight to sleep. Yeah. However, your training would have been significantly less effective. Your body would have absorbed it that much worse. Your recovery would have been that much worse because you would have guzzled something down as soon as you got in the door and then just collapsed into bed. You wouldn't have consistently rehydrated, etc. You probably wake up on Saturday morning depleted and dehydrated, and yes, you would take the whole day to recover, but
I would say as well, the other thing with doing that 4-hour ride on the Saturday, if you're then just literally getting off your bike and heading out and doing loads of stuff with the kids, you're probably not recovering well from that. So actually the gains from that 4-hour ride are going to be affected. So I would agree. I think a 4-hour ride is advantageous. I don't think you need to be doing it week in, week out, which it sounds like he currently perhaps is trying to do or building up to. I think you can be a lot more efficient with 70.3 training and doing like 2 to 3 hour rides, but really quite intense at times. And that's it, you're done. You save yourself a whole hour and a half on a Saturday morning, get off, and you got time to sort of recover, get your food in, go out and do stuff with the kids. Actually, when I was racing professionally and I did 70.3, I never really stepped up to Ironman. A lot of my rides were actually topped out at 3 hours. I would occasionally go and do blocks which had longer rides, and as you say, advantageous, but I wasn't doing them week in, week out, like 4 hour plus rides. So. Yeah,
I mean, there are other options too. You could split your Saturday ride. You could do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. You get the full mileage in. You actually get it more efficient and more effective. You can do it better and concentrate better. Obviously it's not to hold in that position for 4 hours, but as Mark says, you're doing a 70.3, you don't need to hold that position for 4 hours. So you could split it up. You get the same amount of aerobic benefit, you get the same amount of aerobic training, you just don't get the same amount of fatigue when you're taking your kid to football because you woke up at 4 to fit in a 4 hour ride before you took them to football at 10, for example. So there are many ways to do it. I think some ways are better than others, but I also do think that probably you're just on a bit too much the high side. You need to trim some of the fat off your training program.
Right, final question then from Try to Try. I don't have a TT bike at the moment. I've done half distance races with clip-on aero bars. How long do you generally need to adapt to the TT position? Is 2 months enough to adapt for my first Ironman distance race? So quite a significant amount of time they're going to be spending in the aero bars. Do you think 2 months is enough time?
Oh, this is very much it depends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like where are you starting from?
Yeah, how aggressive is your road position already with those clip-ons? Is it really relaxed? You just got clip-on a really relaxed position, or in your fairly aggressive road position? Have you pushed those aero bars down low? Also, what TT bike are you getting? How aggressive is that position going to be? How much are you pushing it? If you do go straight to a very aggressive position, I would say that 2 months is pushing it to try and adapt. I think you're risking lower back problems and discomfort because I think
it's probably worth us pointing out, because it's not just about the physical discomfort you might potentially feel around your arms and stuff. You're completely changing the muscle groups that you are going to be using around your glutes, your maybe like back pains and stuff. So it does take a bit of time to sort of adapt and maybe like build up the strength in different ways around
there'll be a lot of transfer of your fitness from your road bike, but there will be slightly different muscle groups you use, and those are the kind of supporting muscles that you don't think about until you're 3 hours into that session. And that's when you suddenly realize, oh crap, And all the advantage you got from buying a TT bike with all the bells and whistles and super aerodynamic is completely out the window when you're on the TT bike 3 hours into your Ironman and you have to sit up and you can't get back into your air bars for the next 2.5 to 3 hours.
Or you get off the bike and you're hobbling away on the run.
And you can't move. So you do need to get used to that position. You do need to be aware that it will take some time. I think you can do it in 2 months.
Also, what I would say, you're doing an Ironman, you don't need to go super aggressive. You have got to think about the comfort side of things.
True.
I mean, just by simply having a TT bike is, I like to think, it's going to be more aerodynamic than your road bike, so you're going to be going a bit faster anyway on that. Being in the aero bars, you should be reducing your frontal area just quite simply, even if you're not going for an aggressive position. So you are making savings. You don't need to go crazy with this and go super low. Yeah. It's an Ironman, so make sure you're comfortable.
I would add one more caveat to this, or one more point that you need to think about for this. Getting on a TT bike, riding a time trial bike to get ready for an Ironman doesn't automatically mean that you're ready to hold your TT bike position for an Ironman. It's something you have to force yourself to do. It's something you will find that when you're out there in your training rides, there is an excuse to sit up out of that air bar probably every 30 to 60 seconds, and you have to convince yourself not to. Like literally every 30 to 60 seconds there will be a pothole, there will be a turn, there will be a traffic light, there will be a car coming past. You will find a reason to sit up out of that error bar, and then on race day you'll try and lock yourself into it for 30 minutes straight and wonder why it gets so uncomfortable and so why I can't hold it. It is something you have to force yourself to. Even if you set a timer on your bike computer that says, right, 10 minutes now on this road, I'm staying in it, and you will see that 10 minutes is a very, very long time to stay in that position. It feels really like you have to push yourself, and that'll get better and better and better. But it's not something that just happens by getting on a TT bike and going out on the road. It is something that is a conscious effort to push on and push on and push on and spend more and more time in those bars. So make sure you're aware of that and make sure that you're actually consciously adapting, making sure you adapt rather than just, right, I got a TT bike, spend 2 months on it, and I'll be ready for an Ironman on it.
It's a recipe for disaster. All right, I think that's all we've got time for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Coaches Corner. If you've got any more questions, please drop them in the comment section down below this video or any other video using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. We'll see you next week.